our former House Freedom Caucus chairman, who's still chairman to all of us, for leading this initiative and initiating this press conference today. I'm on the Budget Committee, and I had the opportunity this past week to talk to the Biden Budget Director, Ms. Shalonda Young, and it's funny to think about the Biden administration, if it weren't so sad, having a Budget Director, because the Budget Director doesn't understand anything about spending, our national debt, or our budget. I asked Director Young if she knew how much the national debt was. And she tried to say it was $24 trillion instead of $32 trillion. I corrected her that it was actually $32 trillion. I asked her if she understood how much that was per American citizen. She had no idea, so I helped her with the math. Again, the Budget Director, that it was about $100,000 per citizen. I asked her if she knew what the debt to GDP was. She tried to say it was 90-something percent. I said, no, it's about 125%. I asked her, did she know when the last time in our history that it was about 125%? She did not know, so I helped her to recognize that it was 90 years ago, or 80 years ago during World War II. And I asked her what has led to it today versus what led to it 80 years ago. What is the crisis that led to us having this amount of debt? And, of course, she had no answer. And I said, how could we ever handle or absorb a crisis on the level of World War II when we came into it with the same amount of debt to percent to GDP that we exited World War II some 80 years ago? That generation, though, paid off that debt in short order and did not leave it to their children and grandchildren the way that we are threatening to do so today. And so we have this $32 trillion national debt, highest in the history of our country, of course. And what is the president's response? An unprecedented $7 trillion in spending, a budget of $7 trillion. I asked Budget Director Young, I said, do you know how much that equates to for each citizen? Of course she didn't know, so I helped her. That's about $20,000, a little over $20,000 per citizen. And the question is, what are the American people getting? What do they have for that 100,000 share they already have, or the 20,000 that this president proposes to add per American citizen? And I think most Americans would say, hey, they don't have much to show for their share of this national debt. This effort, as my colleagues have already said, to return to 2019 spending levels. To that point, the most ridiculous, reckless, bloated, excessive federal budget debt situation in the history of the country until President Biden. Who would have known that he would be so good at spending money? Never before in the history of the country, $10 trillion in new spending in the first 2 years of administration. This president who makes Jimmy Carter look competent, who returned us to inflation and misery index levels that go back 40 years. This president who makes Barack Obama look moderate by comparison is trying to ruin the country fiscally. I also add my appreciation to Speaker McCarthy, who has appropriately recognized one of the greatest threats to the country is our debt, is our spending, and our fiscal situation that is so unstable. And we're trying to address that. The conference is united. Speaker McCarthy in this conference is largely saying the same thing, talking about cutting $3 to $4 trillion in spending, going back to 2019 non-defense discretionary spending, 2022 spending overall. And we have put forth as a Freedom Caucus modest proposals, frankly, compared to what our national debt situation is, that Chairman Biggs has already talked about, with rescinding the student loan spending, the IRS expansion, the $300 to $400 billion in crazy climate, environmental extremism policies, and so forth. However, there are 1,200 unauthorized programs that we continue to put on autopilot and spend on every year, 1,200 that cost us $500 billion a year on an annual basis, $500 billion. And what Chairman Biggs has led on is these hundreds of specific spending cuts on how we can get back to fiscal stability by making specific cuts to take us back to 2019. The reason why our predecessors passed these huge omnibus spending bills, which will end with this Congress, at least in these next 2 years. We will not do that anymore. We have served notice to that effect. But the reason why they packaged together these huge omnibus spending bills, because you can't defend almost any of the spending programs on their own face value, on their own value, on their own warranty. You can't defend borrowing and spending on those programs anymore to the degree that we have. So we are committed to doing what needs to be done to put the country back on a path to fiscal responsibility.